Welcome to the Book Flood Podcast. I am your host, Tom Nixon. My guest this week is author Jeff Gottesfeld. Jeff is the author of the forthcoming Honor Flight, Celebrating America's Veterans, and the award-winning author of 21 Steps. Jeff does a variety of writing. We're going to get to hear about all of it. Welcome, Jeff.
It's great to be with you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much. Why don't we start with your career trajectory? How did you get to here?
Lord, it's a long and bloody story. I think at this point in my career, I've written just about everything there is to write under the sun that's not about architecture or carp fishing. I spent some time writing teen fiction. From there, I did some work in the theater. I was a soap opera writer. At one point in my career, I was the associate head writer of The Young and the Restless on CBS. And then I made a career veer. I had what I thought was a great idea for a picture book, and I wrote it. And from there, it was off to the races in this genre.
And that was your first picture book?
Yeah, it's my first picture book. I had never done one. I was too old to do it, but what the heck? It was a book called The Tree in the Courtyard. It was about the horse chestnut tree behind the secret annex in Amsterdam, which I had just read in the New York Times had come down in a storm. And that's a great story, but it got to be a better story when I read that scientists had been taking grafts off of the fallen trunk and were sprouting them and were giving them to specific places around the world. There's one at the 9/11 Memorial in New York. There's one at Little Rock High School in Arkansas. There's one in Lockerbie, Scotland. And I was like, okay, this is great. This is great. I'm going to tell Anne Frank's story from the perspective of this tree. And that was my first picture book with Random House.
Wow. It's funny. I don't know that story. And yet just this summer, I visited the secret annex. And so it's
really
cool.
Something, right?
So I just read a book that does sort of the same kind of thing, not with the tree, but talks about the house that she lived in and all the people through history who lived in that house.
Yes. I know the book you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I was at the annex for the second time in my life after a gap of about 40 years or so, maybe 50 years, last spring. It's really something. So that was my first picture book. And I feel like I have a good nose for a story for picture books. And it's all I really want to write now. And let me tell you, it's a pleasure writing a book of 800 words after teen novels of 80,000.
I bet. So your latest book is Honor Flight, Celebrating America's Veterans. It's coming out shortly. How did you come up with that idea?
Well, I would never have had the idea, but for the book that came before it, 21 Steps, which is about the tomb of the unknown soldier and the tomb guards who guard it. I didn't serve in the military. My parents didn't. None of my big strapping brothers did. This was not part of my world. But I got the idea for 21 Steps in the Los Angeles National Cemetery on Memorial Day in 2016. And that book just opened me to a world that I was interested in, but was not part of. And as a result of people I had spoken to about 21 Steps, I came in contact with the Honor Flight Hub in Santa Maria, California, of all places. And from there, the book was a natural to do.
So tell us about the story of Honor Flight.
Well, the Honor Flight program, in brief, it's totally my kind of story, because Honor Flight was started by a guy who had no huge ambitions of it turning into anything massive. He was a physician's assistant, if I'm not mistaken, at a VA hospital in Ohio, and a private pilot. And he had talked with many of the people whom he was treating in the hospital, and they had never been to DC to see their monuments, right? These were World War II veterans, Korean veterans, Vietnam veterans. And in 2005, he organized, I don't know, an armada is probably the right term here, of several private pilots They flew these several veterans to DC, spent a day there, and came back with a great experience. Then, this is not made up, a fellow in Hendersonville, North Carolina, who ran a dry cleaning establishment there, had read about this, and he said, I'd like to do this. I'd like to do this bigger. And the fellow in Ohio said, you know what, you can do it, but don't use our name because this is not going to work bigger with a commercial jet airliner. Well, he did it. It was a success out of North Carolina. They joined forces, and now there are, I believe, 150 honor flight hubs around America
Oh,
that
wow.
have flown about 300,000 veterans and with their guardians to DC. And I have been a guardian on an honor flight. So that's the story of the program. And it's like perfect to write a book about.
Absolutely. When is Honor Flight due to come out?
So it comes out, I believe, March 5th
Mm,
of
mhm.
this year. I did a great deal of speaking behind 21 Steps, and obviously that's already going to start to happen with this book. I'm extremely fortunate that the brilliant Matt Tavares, who illustrated 21 Steps, is illustrated this book as well. He actually signed on to do it before he saw manuscript.
Wow.
We had such a good experience with 21 Steps, and it's going to be just as good with this book.
So my listeners and watchers definitely know Matt Tavares. He was on just a couple weeks ago and talked about the book a little bit and kind of the impetus behind having you on as well, for sure.
Did he talk about how he used his own uncle as the model for the unnamed vet who is at the core of our book?
I don't believe he did. What a great story.
Oh, it's fantastic. So he has an uncle, lives, I think, in the Boston area, a Vietnam era veteran. And I tell the honor flight story from the point of view of an unnamed veteran, aging, widowed, who gets a call from an honor flight hub and invites him. And he's like, I don't know, I don't walk that good anymore. And learns that every vet gets a guardian. And he went on this honor flight and went to DC. They visit the Lincoln Memorial, Iwo Jima, Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, World War II, Korea, Vietnam Wall, of course. And my honor flight, we went to Annapolis, to the Naval Academy, and also to Fort McHenry on this. And so Matt's uncle was his model for this book. And Matt and his uncle went together on an honor flight last September.
That is such a great story.
It's super.
No. So you've done a variety of writing from television to plays and of course picture books. How do you describe yourself as a writer? What does that look like for your writing career?
I don't think I'm the best writer out there. There are people I think who are more talented than me. I think I have a nose for a good story, and I can find stories that should have been told but weren't told, and that are captivating. I mean, for the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, it's been around since 1921, right? It had been guarded by the tomb guards around the clock since July 2nd, 1937. The story was out there to be written. Hadn't been written, I'm on it. I did a book about how women's rights got into the Japanese post-war constitution through the efforts of a woman named Beate Gordon, who had grown up in Japan, obviously not Japanese, had grown up in Japan in the 1980s and spoke perfect Japanese, and went back to Japan with MacArthur in the post-war period. And because of her living in Japan, she saw how difficult things were for Japanese women and Japanese families, and she wrote those clauses into the Constitution. That story had been around since 1946, right?
Wow.
And honor flight has been around a long time. So I can find good stories. And then I'm, I'm very, very conscious of who my audience is for anything that I write. And I think that helps me. Soap opera audiences and the audiences for Breaking Bad and audiences for the NFL, there's not that much crossover there. So if you think about who your audience is and write for them, the books get good. And I work hard. I work very, very hard. If I latch onto a project, I don't let go. The thing I'm working on now is a great example of that.
I hear the working hard part from so many writers because people think, "Oh, this is easy, a picture book. It's only 32 pages. How hard could that be?" Well,
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah, it's hard because in a novel or a TV script, you can get away with a bad sentence. You really can. You can get away with a bad line on a TV show. You can even get away probably with a bad paragraph or a mediocre paragraph on a longer novel. You can't screw up a word in a picture book. You have no room at all for that. And it's one of the reasons that I wince internally often when I'm reading my stuff aloud, because if I could just go in there now and like just turn the screwdriver a little bit and pick a different word, maybe the book would be like 1% better.
What is your writing process like?
I learn as much as I can about my subject matter. I spend a lot of time learning about it. And only when I feel like I've got it in my head solidly so that I can tell the story without writing it, do I sit down and write. And then I expect it to take a while. I'm not a quick writer from first draft to
Mm.
final draft. It can range anywhere from 2.5 months to 7 years to where I get the book to where I want it to be. And I just write it. I write every day. I like to write. So
Mm.
it's a great gig for me. Yeah, for sure. I think, I'm working now on a book about the birth of the animal adoption movement in the
Mm.
world and in America. It started in Philadelphia, Maine,
Wow.
led only by women, by a women's organization there. There had been no history of animal adoption in America before that, and not really humane shelters. And these women organized it. I probably had that idea 7 or 8 years ago. The
Mm.
manuscript's still not perfect, and I'll get it there.
What else are you working on right now?
So I'm very interested in that. I'm interested in the origin story of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer
Mm.
and how that book and song and TV special came about. And then over the last few weeks, I've gotten interested in the story of the American Saint Nick of the town of Wilentz, Luxembourg, in
Hmm.
December 1944, where the Germans had occupied that town. They had had no Saint Nicholas celebration. The Americans retook it, and a Jewish soldier got the idea that it was time to have a new Saint Nicholas celebration for the children of,
Wow.
of Wilentz, and got a GI to play the part of Saint Nick. It's a fantastic story. And they do it now. They still do it. Yeah, so good ideas.
And that's the thing is, good ideas, but putting those good ideas into motion, I think, is the difference.
For sure. For sure. For sure. And then just stick with it until it's there. I realize it could take a while.
Do you do many presentations, schools, libraries, that sort of thing?
I do. I do. I actually love it because I mean it's ironic because my de facto wife Beth is relatively introverted and she's a clinical psychologist, so she spends all day talking to people. Me, I'm actually pretty extroverted and I spend all day writing, looking at a screen. So if I can get out in front of people to talk about my stuff, I'm delighted to do it. And yeah, I do. I mean, I've done groups as small as five, and I did a program with the National Archive for 21 Steps before Veterans Day in 2021 that I think was watched by 60,000 school kids.
Wow. Is there a book or a series of books from your childhood that still resonates with you?
Oh, there's many, and I own copies. I own copies of the most
Nice.
important ones still. I mean, I didn't read a lot of children's books when I was a kid. I was much more interested in nonfiction. There was a book that I think had belonged to my mother by an adventurer named Richard Halliburton called The Book of Marbles, who flew around the world in the 90s and early 30s to go play. He flew past Mount Everest. He climbed Mount Fuji in Japan twice, one in summer and one in the dead of winter. He climbed the Matterhorn. He went to the pyramids. Then this book, the chapters are short, and I just love this book. I pretty much had it memorized. I still own it. That's a good example.
Nice. What are you reading now?
So I'm reading a book called The American Saint Nick
Mm.
by a writer, last name is Lyon, who tells the story of the American Saint Nick, and he actually did a documentary about it as well. I read Hebrew scripture I'm not going to say. I was about to say religiously, but
Religiously?
yeah, religiously. I mean, I'm studying the book of Isaiah now to
Mm.
try and figure out what that amazing thing is all about. And I read incredibly widely when it comes to current material. I read New York Times, Wall Street Journal, The Atlantic, The Spectator. I subscribe to the Free Press, read almost everything that comes through there, and I get my best ideas often from things that I'm reading currently.
Is there anything else you would like to share with our listeners?
Yes, about honor flight. Many, many schools have sponsored teachers to be guardians on honor flights. And in fact, the guardian in honor flight is a fourth grade teacher. He doesn't tell his vet that he's a teacher. And in fact, when they come home and there's a magnificent homecoming for every honor flight, his class is there at the homecoming amongst the 1,000 people who are there to greet the veterans. And his class writes letters to the vet as well. Teachers can go on honor flights. It's not that costly. It's less, I think, than $2,000 to be a guardian, and it's an incredible experience for a teacher or a librarian to be able to do this. I mean, my vet was really different from me. He was a truck driver from Oxnard, California. I don't think he'd ever gone to college. A Vietnam era vet who had served on a destroyer. Every single thing with that is different from me, and we became obviously fast friends. He didn't know I read.
That's nice. By the way, I was on a destroyer, not during Vietnam, but in the 80s. Yeah. Which is not the way you want to go, I think. I mean, it was good at the time because I was young, but they bounce a lot. I want to thank you so much, Jeff, for being on the podcast. For our listeners and watchers, remember you can find us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and everywhere else. Jeff, again, thank you so much. Absolutely. Take care.